Okay, so we are starting the recurring series for the inner sailboat. It lasts for, we break it down in six sessions, talking about different aspects of a metaphor, a sailboat metaphor. Um, Sometimes you are returning, some people may be returning today. Let me start. I always forget to start my timers. Constant thing now, right? So you may be returning to different parts of the series. If you came in the middle, this may be your first time here. Maybe you're curious, or perhaps it's, a last resort for something that you're trying to do for yourself. But whatever the case, I want you to count yourself as courageous because you're taking a step toward a deeper relationship with yourself. You're wanting something different. Um, and wanting something different for yourself means doing something different. And I don't take that lightly. So let me explain what is going on with the space every Sunday for these next 6 meetings. We focus on two foundational things, which is self-love and resilience, as the title of the group says. And it's something that we are practicing or getting into a space to practice and something that we are trying to build, right, individually, but meeting as a group. And we're doing that, or this group is designed to see self-love and resilience as a helpful way to guide through the world, as a helpful way to consistently present our authentic self, right? So just like we would go to the gym and we would work on our bodies, our physiques, and then self-love and resilience are the inner muscles, our inward muscles that we build for a solid foundation to our inner self. Now, it's important to understand, in this group, we understand that it's something that we're choosing to do, and we're making a commitment to do that. So just like a physical transformation, there is work, right? There are things that you do, there's actions, there's exercises. So during that process, maybe you grow tired, maybe there will be some growing pain, some discomfort, right? But at the same time, you're still establishing the roots of real transformation. And it's the kind of transformation that doesn't just look good, but actually feels good despite whatever everything looks like in our environment, right? Most of the exercises will require self-compassion. It will require honesty. It will require openness because our inner critic is often louder than anyone else that's part of our experience. And if you were on the mailing list for the meeting information, then you should have received a worksheet, a PDF about your core values. So that's something that you could do in your free time and take a look at. We won't be going over that worksheet here, but any questions or concerns that you have, feel free to present those as well. Um, And those things are happening because the space is aimed at recalibrating our true north, so to speak. Okay. So we're using the sailboat metaphor in this series to represent all the components needed to thrive in our lives. And so when we say the boat, that's the vessel, and we're looking at the hull, that'll be this week, a strong foundation, looking at the compass, which is our direction and our values, looking at the sails, which are our goals, our attention, and our energy, looking at the rudder, which is about decision making and discernment, looking at the cargo, which is about our beliefs and our past experiences, and finally the anchor as what grounds us or even something that holds us back. So we are established as the captain, which is separate than our whole, right? So we have to have rest and clarity and trust in our ability and our skills to steer our whole. Even when we can't make out where the shore is, right? We still have to be able to steer our vessel. So the focus is about establishing self-love as the foundation of resilience. So for the purpose of this space, resilience will not be about faking it until you make it or making things look good. Resilience doesn't solely depend on pushing through either. Okay. It's going to be about pausing when we need to pause, self-reflection, self-awareness, emotional regulation, and recharge and recovery. All right. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let me try to share my screen. Give me 1 minute here. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. Let me know in the comments if you cannot. All right, inner sailboat. We're talking about the whole today. So first, understanding self-love. What is it? We did do a meeting to discuss self-love, what it is, and put in a nutshell, it's self-acceptance, okay? In order to accept yourself, you have to know a little something about yourself. So just like you would expect someone that wants to get to know you to be interested in you and ask questions about you, then you would be doing the same thing with yourself first and show that interest first, right? So today we'll get into inspecting our whole, which is the foundation of who we are. And this inspection is not about being right or wrong. It's about meeting ourselves where we are today, right now, because we're the only ones with the location, the coordinates, right, to what's going on with us. So it's crucial that we're forthcoming about what those coordinates are because we're in charge of deciding where we're going. We have to make that decision. And we're always trying to align in that direction and choosing things in our lives that align with that direction we've chosen for ourselves. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to mask or hide in the meeting, okay? Um, When we reach a place of self-acceptance, we will not need to mask and we will not need to hide from other folks in our lives either, right? We can feel comfortable being who we are and expressing that way. So today, I want you just to be considering the condition that your boat is in right now. Do you feel like the boat has been through some storms? Does the boat feel sturdy? Does it have any leaks that you want to patch up, right? Um, Considering what the weather is like in your ocean. Okay, are things good right now? Are things feeling foggy? Are there some waves? Are the waters calm? When you're thinking about your compass, what does your compass point to? What's important to you right now? Like, what are your guiding choices? And when we talk about cargo, then what are your beliefs, memories that you're holding that guide decisions that you make right now? So what's guiding your choices? And with the anchor, what techniques, what things ground you in your life right now? Or are there things preventing you from moving forward? Okay. So today, as we go through, just consider what part of your boat do you feel needs attention? Which part is most in need of care and attention right now? If you journal, or have time set aside for reflection, then you can use some of those questions, these questions that we've just gone over as prompts for your time. You know, you don't want to always feel like you're working, but if you set aside time for self-reflection, and those are some of the questions that you can consider. If you don't already set aside time for yourself, I do highly suggest that you do, sometimes just to decompress, sometimes just for a moment of quiet, to reset, to recharge, right? And be able to disconnect from things sometimes that can just be causing anxiety or heightened feelings, deep emotions, things like that, right? Let me see. I'm gonna try to drop something in the chat really quick. Let me see if I can. I can't see the chat right now. I'll drop these questions for reflection later. I know I just kind of ran through them. I didn't really put them on the screen, so I'll drop that in. Okay. So self-love is the conscious act of valuing, accepting, and caring for yourself on a physical, emotional, and a mental level, right? And sometimes the spa might help, and sometimes it may not help. But those are the things that we have to decide. I also want to talk about or use the illustration of wheat and tares today, right? So if you could imagine a farmer walking through a field of wheat, right? It's usually really golden, especially when it's mature. But when it's not mature, it's this green color that you see here. And the wheat for us is going to represent nourishment, growth, and our true value, right? But growing alongside it is going to be some tares as well, right? And what are tares? They are weeds that look like wheat. Okay, so weeds, weeds, that look like um, wheat. And they're competing for the same soil, for the same sunlight, and for the same water. So for that same nourishment, right? And the farmer cannot always separate themselves or separate those tares immediately. But as growth happens, as they both start to mature, then the weed becomes very clear and distinctive from the wheat itself. And in that same way, that's how our core identity is, right? Our whole. It carries both the truth of who we are, and it carries the false stories that we have taken ownership of, stories that have been planted through life experiences and people that we've had contact with. So self-love is the farmer that's within us, right? It's discerning, it's strength, and it's able to clear away and help us clear away what does not belong, those things that are of no use, okay, on our journey. So when we're talking about the hull of the ship, that determines whether the ship floats or it sinks. If it's not in good repair, it's going to sink, right? And it's always going to need some type of maintenance. So we're always in a position of growing, learning new things, okay? Our vessel is able to hold the integrity, let's say it like that. So just like the wheats and tares, the worth, okay, is what we're holding on to in our journey of life. If we have a strong vessel, a strong hull, then we're able to weather different storms. We're able to get through life when things are not as desired. It doesn't have to be the end of our story. It doesn't have to prevent us from navigating to our vision, right? So if we have a cracked hull, or we're weighed down by the tears, right? The tears are the false beliefs about our worth, then we're taking a big risk on the water, a risk that at some point we can even end up drowning or feeling stranded, feeling lonely, right? Feeling like we're not moving forward. So I want today to be the beginning of patching the cracks and separating the wheat from the tares in the soil of our self-image. And we're doing that by establishing our core identity. A lot of times we have difficulty talking about ourselves, right? But we know we've had a lot of experiences. We have actually achieved a lot of things in life. We've filled a lot of roles as well. So our core identity is who we are beyond those experiences. But a lot of time we identify who we are with roles, with experiences, and with our achievements, right? And because we do that, we will also identify ourselves with our struggles, but we're separate from that. Those are the things that happen in our lives. That's not our identity. Okay. Our identity is our unique spirit, our personality, and our values, our core values. If everything that we have today were stripped away, we'd just be left with our values and our personality and our aura, right? So if you've ever heard a person say that money doesn't change you, it just magnifies who you are, that's talking about our core values, our personality, who we are at the core. So whatever the external environment is, doesn't change how we make decisions, doesn't change how we operate in life. It just changes the resources that we have available to us, right? So, um, our core values are the imprints that we live with, and they shape how we make decisions. Our values dictate the why in our lives, the reason why we keep going, the reason why we do what we do, despite what the environment is like. And our core values dictate behaving in ways that align with what we believe. And that's what actually motivates us to persevere. It's the why. So when we talk about self-worth, um, then we're talking about our sense of value, right? It's independent of what someone else is saying about us. It's being able to honestly evaluate that value and be able to locate evidence in our experience. It's about recognizing our inherent self-respect as well, because it's easy to assess our worth through like the good things that we do, right? But it's not the deed that makes us worthy or dictates our self-worth, okay? It's the why behind the deed. Maybe we believe in justice or service. And so when we choose actions that align with those core values, then that reinforces our worth, right? It makes us feel good about the choices that we make, and we feel fulfilled in life, right? We feel satisfied. So we're not choosing it because other folk believe what we're doing is worthy or deserving of recognition, right? That's the fleeting fulfillment, right? Because other people's values may not be in alignment with our own values. Okay. If we only do it for the gaze of the crowd, or, because we want to please this person or please that person, then we can easily lose our motivation. We can feel like even that we're losing ourselves. And it may feel a bit more difficult to persevere through hard times, when things are getting a bit rough, when things are not feeling like they're going well, right? Then we also have experiences where maybe we can only push through and survive through life because people are looking on to our situation, or people are making judgments about who we are, people are cheering us on, right? But if that does not exist, then we're still without fulfillment, okay? So the connection isn't about what we do, it's about how we feel about what we do. I always say that the good news is, we get to decide what we feel, because we get to choose how we frame our experiences. And that's not about delusion, because I talk about reframing a lot. And there is a difference between reframing and then delusion, right? So we want to stay accountable. We want to stay truthful with ourselves and not being afraid of our truth, right? We don't need to have dependency on others to validate what we do, because they may not frame things the same way. Their experiences may lead them to different choices, and what they value may lead them to different choices. But it doesn't mean that either person is moving in the wrong direction. Just each person is moving in a direction that they align with, right? And that's why we don't want to compare ourselves to others, or at least we shouldn't compare ourselves to others. Once we start to receive that concept, then we reduce a lot of stress and anxiety in our lives, because there's a distinct difference between thinking this can't happen, this won't happen, I'm never going to do this, I'm never going to measure up to this, and then being able to evaluate how can this strengthen my current abilities. how does this increase my skill, or what value comes from this experience, right? Every step that we're taking forward, it's not always going to feel good or feel the way that we want or shape up the way that we thought that it should or go the way that we want, right? So, but every step that we take can be a stepping stone to where we're headed, right? So it's not always about being positive. We're going to have those emotions, but it's about not letting those things get in the way of our original vision, not letting those things cloud our original why. Okay. So our core values are, it's a standard by which we measure ourselves, not by what other people are doing. Okay. And not by what other people think is a success or what's progressive, but by our core values. And to do that, we have to know what we value. Okay. Value living requires value-driven behavior. And that is what keeps us grounded and connected to our authentic self. So that's one reason why I included that PDF in there about core values, because that's something that you could take a look at if you're thinking, what are my values? That's a good worksheet to go through. And speaking of that, I wanted to add this slide in there because here's some words that describe core identity. Sometimes we're thinking about that and maybe we're overthinking, making it more difficult than it has to be. But here's a couple of things. Take a look at the screen. You have things like optimistic, dreamer, selective, resourceful, genuine. Consider what words describe your core identity. And it can be on this slide or not on this slide. If you have some to add, feel free to drop it into the chat that you're comfortable with. But I also want you to pay attention to what words are coming up that have meaning for you, right? Our traits reflect who we are inwardly and how we choose to live. So are we able to express that outwardly? Are we hiding parts of ourselves? Why might we feel the need to hide parts of ourselves? In what way is hiding beneficial? In what way is expressing ourselves outwardly beneficial? Does it matter what folks think about whatever hobbies we have or whatever interests we have, whatever job we're doing, our family dynamics, right? And then ask ourselves, why does that matter? Okay, because in order to build self-love, we have to be able to accept ourselves, okay, and find acceptance. A lot of times we read things coming from other individuals as rejection, but we see it the same. Would we see it the same if it was phrased as alignment, right? Is this person, what they're thinking, in alignment or misalignment to what I value or what I'm thinking, okay? Would we continue to try to make things fit if we viewed things, incoming information, as in alignment or out of alignment? If we viewed other people's core values as in alignment or out of alignment, meaning it doesn't have to be the same thing, right? But it's not misaligned with who we believe ourselves to be. That's how we choose friends. That's how we develop close relationships. So if we view things as alignment or misalignment, what does it change in our lives? Would it change anything in our lives? Okay, so those are just a few questions I like to toss around, but it's also to recognize that we're always growing and that we're always learning as well, right? What we value in our 20s may not be the same thing that we value in our 60s. So every stage of life that we're going through, we are competent individuals, right? With the information and with the skills that we have. Even if we may change the boundaries around our generosity or decide a different style of communication works better for us, right? We're still communicative, we're still generous individuals, okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that we stop being those things. It doesn't necessarily mean that we stop valuing those things, okay? We may find that values also change over time, but all we're actually doing is building upon our skills, building upon our abilities, and growing our knowledge, okay? We may find new ways that we want to use that information, use our tools, but we always have some tools. Sometimes we don't trust our tools. That's why we look to other people, or we say, okay, am I using it right? Is this how you use your tool, right? But it may not need to be used in the same way. So our experiences are what's building our competence, and what we're learning is what we put into practice, right? We can learn a lot of things, but if we don't actually apply it, it doesn't change the result in our lives. So our lives are always going to be about becoming and unfolding, right? And there's a level of discomfort and stress that will happen in our lives to ignite change, okay? To spark change. So all of our flaws and all of our fabulousness, that makes us who we are. And we can choose to learn from those experiences without needing to be ashamed of experiences, especially the ones that we feel are not so desirable, right? It's the push out of the comfort zone. It's the bell ringing of maybe something needs to be different. So when we come back to the wheat and the tares, as you can see on the left side, the wheat up top, that's the good fruit, that's the good harvest, right? But it also looks a lot like the weed on the bottom. They both look very familiar. They look very similar. So it can be difficult to separate those things early on, the things that we grow up with, right? Maybe something that our teachers told us, maybe something that our caregivers told us, maybe something that our partners, our friends. But as both the wheat and the tares start to mature, there is a distinct difference. Okay. And a knowledgeable harvester, which would be yourself, a person who is self-aware, a person who accepts themselves, knows the difference between the wheat and the tare. And when the wheat is mature, in this very literal sense, it actually kind of bows over a little bit, but the tear itself just continues to stand upright as it matures. So it makes it easier to pick out the tears, right? And that's what self-love and resilience does for us as well. It makes it easier to weed out the things that are depleting in our lives, that are self-sabotaging in our lives, okay? And those things have to be separated because the seeds of the weed, right, the WEED, are poisonous. And so those tares or weeds can choke out our good harvest, the best of us putting our best foot forward, us knowing that our efforts are good, us knowing that we're always growing, us accepting ourselves at each stage of our lives while we grow, and knowing that we're worthy while we grow. Okay. These tears can be adverse childhood experiences, they can be distorted criticisms. Tears can be impulsivity, right? Not thinking before we act. It can be social anxiety, something that kind of makes us hesitant to either develop relationships, trust people, move forward. It can be unrealistic self-standards or lack of self-awareness. So tears are the leaks and weak points that seem to work against us. And they are the leaks that can slow us down or even cause us to sink, like I said. Leaks are what's hurting our attempts to effectively cope with the stress in our lives. Sometimes movies and social media, it'll put it out as, the best life is not having stress, but there's a healthy level of stress that continues to prompt our growth, continues to push us out of our comfort zones, right? But stress also can shine a light on our weakness. And so those weaknesses can be physical, they can be cognitive, or they can be behavioral, right? And so being aware of what our weaknesses are is just as important as being aware of our strength. So to ensure that we maintain momentum, to ensure that we keep our valued life goals in front of us, then we need to be well versed with both of them, right? Because weaknesses are opportunities for growth. We can work with those, okay? But um, unrealistic statements and self-sabotage is something that it can't be worked on. It's a disillusion, right? And it definitely tears away and eats away at us. So a lot of the times, stress throws like all of our attention on a weakness, and we'll go into self-criticism, right? We start to completely ignore the tools that we already have in the toolkit. Maybe we've been through a similar situation before. I used to talk about problem solving a lot. And that would be like, have I gone through something similar? What did I do then? So how can I build from there, right? Things that help reduce some of the stress. There's some things that we try to control that we don't have control over, right? So understanding what we have control over and what we don't also can be a way to relieve some of our stress, all right? So sometimes we neglect to seek out tools that may be helpful for us as well. And so we feel stagnant or like we can't really move forward. But when those leaks are starting to present themselves, it is crucial to distinguish, okay, is this a wheat? So is it what's the truth about our worth, about our values? Or is this a tear, right? Is this just negative self-talk? Is this inherited doubts? Is this limiting beliefs? Okay, so it's important to explore what makes you feel whole, what makes you feel worthy, and when do you experience the feeling of being enough? It's important to pay attention to those things, not just the things that we feel need to be changed or need to be improved, right? But the glimmers in life, the things that do bring us comfort, the things that do bring us joy, the things that do calm us, the things that do ground us, okay? Because we can make pivots and we can make adjustments at any time in our lives. We can invest in ourselves and not have to feel guilty either. So I want to expand on this a little bit more. I did take a few phrases that people often say in my one-to-one work, and I wanted us to take a look at each statement and try to, well, a couple of statements, and trying to identify like which statements are a growth area. We'll call it a growth area weakness. When I start talking like that, it has a lot to do with a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, right? So a growth area weakness means that it's useful to acknowledge and you can work with it versus like the distorted self-talk or those inherited opinions from other people that are not true, or just things that we say to ourselves that is not true. And the first example we have is that I procrastinate too much, right? So it's important to consider, is what we're saying a fact or a judgment, right? If we're saying that we procrastinate too much, then is it because we're noticing that we're avoiding tasks? Are there reasons why we avoid tasks? Like, do you avoid tasks because you're anxious, because you're overwhelmed, right? Because that part would be the hardcore, the evidence, the fact, right? So saying you procrastinate too much is a judgment, right? But procrastination presents an opportunity for growth as well. It's a growth area. So you might want to consider, okay, what steps can I take to work with the anxiety? Because that's when I procrastinate, right? What can I do to reduce my instances of being overwhelmed? What tools, what support can I employ, right? So it can be about taking small steps, breaking down tasks, or it might be seeking professional intervention. It has to be the tool that works for you. So when we talk about reframing, the reframe then becomes I avoid tasks when I'm anxious. That's the fact, right? But also I can take steps to manage that anxiety, and that's what's opening up our opportunity. So we also have statements like, oh, I'll never be good enough. Are we looking at a fact or are we looking at a judgment? Okay. Um, what is the evidence to support that we're never going to be good enough? Okay. So growth is always a part of our experiences. So we're always going to be good enough. This statement is then more of a tear or a limiting belief. So when we have limiting beliefs, that's where we can use things like affirmation. That's where we can employ self-compassion. That's where we can be patient with ourselves as we take steps to release limiting beliefs. And as we decide what are the tools we're using to release limiting beliefs, okay? Because that's not our truth. So if we were breaking down the filter itself, there's a couple of things, okay? First, you would be asking, is this an observable fact or a passing judgment? Right? Sometimes we even just get frustrated with ourselves, okay? So as far as the procrastination, it's a fact, right? Why? Because we know that we missed 2 deadlines, right? So we see it, it's happening. The judgment is when we say, I'm lazy and I'm worthless because I missed those 2 deadlines, okay? Those are the type of statements that eat away at us and put us in a situation of feeling like we're drowning and we can't move forward. So that's why it's important to look at, okay, what's happening when I procrastinate? In this case, we were talking about being anxious, right? Being overwhelmed. And so then we can actually look at that anxiety, look at overwhelming situations, and then figure out a plan, steps, even if they're small steps, to start to address those things that then affect our results, what's happening, the procrastination, right? So when we're making statements, we want to look at, is it pointing to something that we can learn from or something that we can strengthen? That's what makes it wheat. Or is it a statement that just shuts me down? That's what makes it a tear. Okay. So when we see it as wheat, it's yeah, sometimes I'm avoiding tasks when I feel overwhelmed. Well, what can I do about that? I can learn better coping strategies. What's available? What works for me? Those are things, tangible things that can happen for us, right? But the tear can become, I'll never get anything right. And if we believe that we'll never get anything right, then we believe that there's nothing tangible that can be done, so we won't take action towards that. And when we don't take action towards that, we get in this loop of doing the same thing, right? And we know what happens when we do the same thing. We do not get a different result. All right. So it's important to start investigating, okay, well, where is that belief coming from that you don't get anything right? Is it from experience? Is it from family? Is it from culture? Is that someone else's voice that you are taking ownership of? Is it coming from fear? Okay. And then what's the loving reframe? Because affirmations a lot of times are just reframes, right? It's a little bit of self-hypnosis, reframing the situation. So if we're starting with, I procrastinate too much, to make that wheat, to make it something we can work with, we're stating the facts. I avoid tasks when I'm getting overwhelmed, right? But the growth part is I can develop some habits to ease that anxiety, to ease that overwhelming feeling, and I can start small. What can I start with? We could put a plan together. We can look for tools to work with. We can strengthen our tools if we've been working with something, right? So it's important that we classify it. A weakness, a lot of people see weakness as something that's bad, right? But it's really just an area for growth or something real that doesn't have to lock us into being this vision that we see of ourselves. It doesn't have to lock us into negative self-talk. It doesn't have to lock us into the limiting belief or doubt that's undermining our truth. And when we're able to do that, then we can participate in an actionable response. All right. So if it's wheat, we're looking at ways, and there will be ways to nurture growth, setting small goals, seeking support, practicing certain skills. If it's a tear, we won't see things, we won't be able to set goals with it, right? but it'll be something that we can rephrase. It'll be something that we can replace with an affirmation or a grounding statement that aligns better with our truth. Okay. So this wheat versus tares filter is meant to help see weaknesses as areas where we can grow or where we can manage. What skills, what support, what goals can we use to manage this and either make it occur less, like reduce its impact, right? Or increase our productivity with it. So that's why I tell people it's not about perfection, but we can maintain and patch leaks, right? The tears in our lives are just illusions, and those illusions drain us. And when we're being drained, we can't move forward. We can't see our vision. Something is getting in the way of our vision, okay? And so those tears have to be uprooted. Sustaining self-love is about honoring your worth, and that means that you're living in alignment with your values. It's about how you show up for yourself, the standards that you set, and the energy that you allow into your life. So set aside 10 minutes each day, whether it's in the morning or at night, maybe 10 minutes both in the morning or at night, because you're the captain. Your vessel needs care, right? Because when you're caring for it, it's stronger, it's steadier, and it will be able to weather storms. If it's not in good repair, and that's physically, emotionally, and mentally, right, then we run the risk of more harm than good. Both will be happening, right? So it's about showing up for ourselves, the standards that we set for ourselves, and the energy that we allow into our lives. It's not about perfection, okay? So one thing that we could talk about here, or if you feel more comfortable doing it on your own, putting things into practice, all right? That's what this group is about. I know people get a little bit uncomfortable with discussing, personal things, especially when the group is changing a lot, and this is an open group, so I definitely understand that. But the work that you do for yourself is always going to be more important. It's not about, there can be support knowing that you're not the only person going through things, and listening to ways that other people manage as well can be supportive. But definitely when you're alone, when you're quiet, when you are by yourself, the work that you do for yourself is going to be important. The action, the things that you apply to your life is going to be important. That's what's going to change the results as you know it, right? So if we're looking at building this week, which wheat or weaknesses are you able to accept as part of your truth, and know that you're still working toward growth, right? It's not the end all be all. Which tears do you need to release? Because it's not your truth, it's not your voice. And are there, if you're a person who works with affirmations, are affirmations something that work for you as far as reframing experiences? What can you use to strengthen your whole? What tools might be appropriate for you? So this week, we could focus on those things. I'll go ahead and open it up for some discussions or questions that I may have come up. I didn't see anything in the chat, but we'll take the rest of the time to have some discussion, expression, and things of that sort. I'll stop the recording. I don't record those parts.